it's literally the last few minutes of the Seoul Congress, and how do we wish that it doesn't end, Marlies? But all good things in life have to come to an end, and at least as far as the IFA Congress is concerned, it's always back a year after. So while we are itching and excited to attend the London Congress and witness the beautiful English summer, we have to do the honorary post IFA Congress recap for all our viewers, and we have two special guests. On my left, Kuntal, who is a IFA Executive Committee member, IFA India Office Bearer, partner of Nanubai Desai and Associates, and our knowledge partner DTS and Associates. Kuntal will be giving his take on some of the sessions, including a couple of rulings on which he spoke today at the IFA Congress on permanent establishment. And on my right, Marlies Ruiter, the former OECD head of tax treaty and transfer pricing division, and currently the global tax policy leader of EY. And in a spare time, you also play hockey, right, Marlies?
No, I don't. That's the only thing I don't do.
Marlies, I'm sure you wish you played, because it's almost looking like a hockey turf. The turf is so big now on the transfer pricing debate, and yes. I think the statement that stood out from the morning panel on recent developments in international taxation, which was again a highlight of this Congress, is when you said that transfer pricing has become extremely subjective and complex. Can you explain that, Marlies, for everyone?
Yes, if you look at the new rules, but also the existing rules, of course they always start from the position that kind of arm's length principle is not an exact science, it's an art, we have ranges, and a taxpayer can choose its starting position as long as it leads to an arm's length result. What you see nowadays is that subjectivity in combination with the complexity of the new kind of rules, it means that tax administrations are getting more and more uncomfortable with taxpayers having so much leeway, I have the impression. And that means that there's more and more questioning whether the tax rules and transfer pricing rules are still fit for purpose, whether we should go to global formula apportionment. We see taxpayers being challenged more and more also when they are within the range to make sure that there are more margins in a country. So definitely a lot of disputes on transfer pricing, and I think a lot of potential new disputes also in the future.
If you were the head of the OECD transfer pricing division still,
yes,
what would you do?
I think the first step I would take in short term is simplify, because I think we really need a simplification exercise. I think that can be done by global competent authority agreements, multilateral ones, containing safe harbors. And we did, when I was at the OECD, we did some work on that, multilateral safe harbors for routine activities. That already would simplify a lot. It would save a lot of administrative costs. And that would mean that the administrations can focus on the most important things.
You're saying prevent disputes rather than...
Prevent disputes and in particular on the low-risk situations, the routine situations, and then find tailor-made solutions for now, for the more difficult ones, for the residual profits, for allocation value to IP, for example.
Mm-hmm. I'll come back to you, Marlies. Kuntal, your take on this session and overall the discussions at the Congress. They were more than riveting. I think they were quite insightful.
So let's put the entire discussion into perspective. If we were to first talk about the overall theme of the Congress and where the discussion was concentrated and what kind of the future trends we are looking at, I think its message is out there very loud and clear that tax controversy, dispute over the nexus and the allocation of profit is here to stay. It's going to take a lot of debate and a lot of persuasion to reach to a consensus, and I think we can see everywhere, whether it is EU or US or whether developing countries, everybody's trying to have their right of tax. And we heard at the panels, even in the OECD panel and also in the GAR panel, that what is coming out from all the discussion is the recognition that there is the existing definition with regard to establishing the nexus to a source state, especially for without physical presence, is ineffective. And people are concerned that we'll have to have new definitions. And I think the old concept that the We don't need to have new rules for e-commerce. We don't need to have new rules for digital economy. I think that is coming to a big change. People are recognizing that we need to have new definitions, we need to have new rules so that we can create certainty, because that's what ultimately the taxpayer, the advisors, they want certainty and predictability on where it is going to be.
With regard to transfer pricing, 6 years back, we had that famous $10 billion adjustments. It spooked a lot of global MNCs, but it did lead to some important course corrections. So maybe it did not end up being futile. You had the APA program, which is now quite successful. You have more than 200 APAs concluded, though 90% plus or 95% are unilateral ones. You have the MAP, which is now picking up steam. 200 MAPs closed with the US and a few with Japan and so on and so forth, even with UK. So you have the alternate dispute resolution mechanism, which has actually picked up steam. Safe harbor margins have been rationalized and I think enhanced so that more companies go for safe harbor. In TP, India has tried. I don't know whether successful or not, but they have tried to minimize the disputes.
So I think if you see any case, transfer pricing as such is not a perfect science. It's economics, it's subjective, and therefore it leaves a lot of room for difference of opinion, and therefore it leads
and therefore it always keeps Kuntal busy.
No, I think looking in a very, very pragmatic and in a serious tone, I think the role of dispute resolution is going to be a very important feature for the international tax development, because unless there is a quick redressal of the multi effect as well as the unilateral effect by all the countries, I think at the end the industry is going to suffer. At the end, the global trade is going to suffer. And from that regard, I think the minimum requirement now, minimum action point, which is on AP 14 with regard to the dispute resolution, is going to play a very important role. And we will have to wait and see how every country gets aligned to it. And another factor which even Marlies mentioned, that probably it's time to that we have a procedure or a set of rules in place that we ensure that we avoid disputes.
That's a dream world. Marlies, you don't want to put us out of work, right?
Well,
but on a serious note, Pascal proposed the ICAP,
yes,
the International Compliance Assurance Program. Mr. Ranjan was not convinced. He said, it's another word for multilateral APA. Why do you need an ICAP? So where would you stand on that debate?
I think that prevention of double taxation is always better than resolution. And I think currently the rules are subjective. So to get to certainty, you also need tailor-made processes like APAs or multilateral APAs. It's difficult to do it through clear rules. So ICAP is a form of that, and I think it's a very good way to do it. I think there's more room for multilateral APAs, more room kind of for agreeing worldwide that your system works, more room for also kind of multilateral safe harbors. And that will not put us out of work, because there's more.
I hope it doesn't put us out of work.
More than enough work for all of us, I believe.
As a former competent authority, Marlies, 20 years back, or maybe 15 years back, do you think that prevention of disputes really depends a lot also on the interpersonal relations, the equations and chemistry between the two competent authorities? Like we saw in India and US, Mr. Ranjan and Bob Stack were able to find solutions to vexed issues which many people really did not give a chance anyone could find a solution to in that.
I fully agree. I think personal relations, being part of one community, is extremely important, because that means that you start talking the same language, you start understanding each other, while everything that's in black and white only, kind of it's action, reaction, it's not a dialogue. And when you're together, when you know each other, then that is when it becomes a dialogue and you can come to common solutions. So that kind of common language is extremely important.
And that dialogue has increased over the last few years. And BEPS has really, in some way funneled or fueled or been a trigger with, all the tax tax commissioners and policymakers coming together, sitting on a table, exchanging notes, and trying to sort out their differences.
Yes, and what I've heard, because you just mentioned India kind of improving MAP, kind of it taking off, and that's what I hear all over the world. That kind of MAP is taking off, MAP is functioning better. So I think the next step would be for taxpayers to more and more find their way to MAP, because there are still many businesses incurring double taxation and swallowing it, not going to MAP because they don't trust the process.
Last question, Marlies. It cannot be all doom and gloom. Even Bob Stack, the former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Treasury for International Tax Affairs, Bob Stack too, was not sure whether when he talked in regard to the transfer pricing rules for the financial transactions sector, too complex. He said it seems the OECD has not been able to come up with a consensus, and which is why it's a public draft is a euphemism for no consensus. So is it all gloom when it comes to transfer pricing, or is there some silver lining somewhere?
These public discussion drafts are extremely welcome and good to invite comments and to invite views. We had our first public discussion draft on country-by-country reporting when I was there, and we received 1,000 pages of comments, also showing us the things that were not working in the draft, which was the aim of putting it out. So I think the one thing we shouldn't do is be prejudiced about the outcome. I think there still can be a very good outcome, but there's definitely a reason to provide good comments.
Any silver lining in the transfer pricing landscape? Any silver lining?
Silver lining, maps are working and disputes are being resolved. And what I hope the silver lining will be is that there will be an agreement on low value adding services and prevention of disputes on that.
Looking forward to London?
Oh, certainly, absolutely. And I think what we can also, in the session which I was also coming as an expert witness, I think we had discussion about how the P rules are getting changed, how we are looking at convergence, how are we looking at unilateral action by all the countries, and also how the disputation is going about and how it is increasing.
So we did discuss in the session in the morning session the United States Supreme Court decision in South Dakota versus Wayfair. We discussed the MasterCard ruling in India and the e-funds ruling, which Kuntal brought to all of us. Quite fascinating, and the slide title was shifting PEs, and I would call it the shifting sands on the PE subject. But Kuntal is excited about London. I can see that. Marlies, London?
Yes, very excited about London. Many of my friends will be there, which is a good thing, and definitely kind of the discussion on transfer pricing and financial transactions will have progressed. So we will have very good panels there. We'll
catch up with Marlies and Kuntal at the London Congress exactly a year from now. That's all we have from the Seoul Congress, from Amay and me, the Tax Sutra team at Seoul. Goodbye. But we will be back with all the action from the London Congress. And if you're wondering why we are doing it in front of the Mexico booth, that's what Amay preferred. I'll show you where the London Congress is going. I'll just come here. It's here. This is the London Congress 2019, September 8 to 12 is the London Congress, and we'll get you all the action exactly a year from now. Goodbye.